Matthew 5:31. Under the heading, "Except your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will in no wise enter the kingdom of heaven." And then Jesus gives 6 illustrations that deal with the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees and how they taught the law. And he compared it with God's original intention and what God was thinking when he gave the commandments. And they were being taught much different from what God had meant when he made these commandments. And so we get into the 31st verse. We have, "And it hath been said," that is, this is what they've been telling you, "that whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement. But I say unto you, that whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for the cause of fornication, he causes her to commit adultery, and whosoever shall marry her that is divorced commits adultery." This is, Jesus said, what you have been told by the scribes and the Pharisees, that if you put away your wife, give her a writing of divorcement. They were teaching that this is God's rule on the subject of divorce. If God, or that is, if you want to divorce your wife, the important thing is giving her this writing of divorcement. Back in the law, Deuteronomy chapter 24, the Lord speaks on the subject of divorce to the children of Israel. He said, "When a man has taken a wife and married her, and it comes to pass that she finds no favor in his eyes, because he has found some uncleanness in her, then let him write her a bill of divorcement, and give it in her hand, and send her out of his house. And when she is departed out of his house, she may go and be another man's wife. And if the latter husband hate her, and writes her a bill of divorcement, and gives it in her hand, and sends her out of his house, or if the latter husband die, which took her to be his wife, her former husband, which sent her away, may not take her again to be his wife, after that she is defiled. For that is an abomination before the Lord, and thou shalt not cause the land to sin, which the Lord thy God hath given thee for an inheritance." So that's basically what the law has to say concerning the subject of divorce. If a man has taken a wife, married her, and it comes to pass that she find no favor in his eyes, because he has found some uncleanness in her, then let him write her a bill of divorcement. So Jesus said, "It hath been said, whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement." That seems like they were teaching just sort of a concise version of what was in the law. That's what the scribes and the Pharisees were teaching the people. You'd say, well, what's wrong then with their teaching? Well, it came to the subject of the interpreting of "she find no favor in his eyes because of some uncleanness." So they said, we have to define what is uncleanness. What is meant? He's found in her some uncleanness. And there were 2 basic schools of interpretation. One by a rabbi by the name of Hillel, and he took a very narrow strict view, the uncleanness was a moral impurity. And he declared that was the only reason for a divorce. Moral impurity, fornication. The other school of rabbis took a very liberal view of this. They interpreted uncleanness as if he found someone that he liked better, or if she burned his dinner, or if she spoke in a disrespectful way of his parents. And thus they had a very liberalized view of found some uncleanness in her. And naturally, the people liked the second interpretation more than the first. And they were beginning to lean towards a lot of divorces in Israel. Solomon, addressing his son, said, "Drink waters out of your own cistern, and running waters out of your own well. Let thy fountains be dispersed abroad, and rivers of water in the streets. Let them be only thine own, and not a stranger's with thee. Let thy fountain be blessed, and rejoice with the wife of thy youth. Let her be as a loving hind in a pleasant roe, and let her breast satisfy thee at all times. Be ravished always with her love. For why will you, my son, be ravished with a strange woman, and embrace the bosom of a stranger?" Now, it is interesting to me that Solomon gave such good practical advice in regards to marriage and women. I guess he probably understood women more than any other man. He had enough of them. But the prophet Malachi spoke to the people, and he said that the people would say, "But why will God punish?" He said, "Because the Lord has been witness between you and the wife of your youth, against whom you have dealt treacherously. Yet is she thy companion and the wife of thy covenant? And did not he make you one? Yet had he the residue of the Spirit, and why one? That he might seek a godly seed. Therefore, take heed to your spirit, and let none deal treacherously against the wife of his youth. For the Lord, the God of Israel, saith that he hates divorce. For one covers violence with a garment, saith the Lord of hosts. Therefore, take heed to your spirit, that you deal not treacherously." Perhaps you've noticed that the issues all went the men's way. A woman could not divorce a man for any cause. Yet the way they were interpreting the law is that if a fellow just got upset because she displeased him, talked back to him or something, he could divorce her and send her out of the house. He was never to leave the house. She was the one that had to leave the house. She had no recourse. She had no appeal. And so the woman really had the short end, you might say, of the stick in this kind of a situation. And the Pharisees were emphasizing the main thing is he's got to give her that writing of the bill of divorcement. And that's where they made the big issue, make sure you give her this writing of the bill of divorcement. And he would hand it to her with 2 witnesses, and she'd have to pack her goods and get out of the house. Now, under the law, where it said the woman can go out and, if she's been put out by her husband, she can go out and marry whoever she wishes. Jesus challenged that. He said, "But I say unto you," now this is what they've been saying, this is what they've been teaching, "But I say unto you, that whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, causes her to commit adultery, and whosoever shall marry her that is divorced commits adultery." So Jesus gave a much stricter interpretation. And rather than taking the liberal view that a man could put away his wife with a bill of divorcement for just any kind of thing that upset him, Jesus said there was only one cause or one reason that he could divorce his wife, and that was for moral impurity, fornication. And Jesus declared, rather than just going out and marrying any man that she wanted, when she married again, she was committing adultery. Now, in the 19th chapter of Matthew, you want to turn there, beginning with verse 3, we find that the Pharisees came to Jesus, tempting him, and they were saying unto him, "Is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause?" In other words, they knew the teaching of Jesus. They knew how strict he was. And notice, this was a question by which they were seeking to tempt him or to trip him up. What they were wanting to do is to show that the teaching of Jesus was actually different from the teaching of the Mosaic law. And everyone recognized that the Mosaic law came from God. There was no question on that. The Jews believed that God inspired Moses to give the law. Now, if Jesus is saying something that is contradictory to the Mosaic law, then how can he claim to be from God? How can he make the claim that he is the Messiah, the Son of God, because he is actually saying things that are contradicting the law of Moses? And that was their whole endeavor here, is to find Jesus in conflict with the Mosaic law so that they could say to the people, look, he can't be of God because he is contradicting the law of God given to us by Moses. So Jesus answered and said unto them, "Have you not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, For this cause shall a man leave father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. Wherefore they are no more two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man put asunder." That's exactly what they wanted him to say. And they sought to close the trap. They said unto him, "Why did Moses then command to give her a writing of divorcement and put her away?" You're contradicting what Moses said. And they think that they've caught him in a contradiction to Moses. And he said unto them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, allowed you to put away your wives. But from the beginning it was not so. And I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, commits adultery. And whoso marries her that is put away commits adultery. Now, Jesus goes back before the Mosaic law. In other words, yes, this was in the Mosaic law, acknowledged. But it was only put into the law because of the hardness of your hearts. This is not God's original intent. This is not God's original purpose. God's original purpose and intent was one for life, until death do us part, actually. And that was God's original intention, that marriage be for life. But because of the hardness of their hearts, Moses allowed you to put away your wives. It was an allowance that God had made under the Mosaic law, but it was not God's first wish or first desire in the beginning when God made them male and female. It was God's intention that when you took a wife, you took her for life. When you took a husband, you took him for life. For rich or for poor, in sickness and in health, for better or worse. And in these days, when Jesus was making these very restricted commands, the institute of marriage was just about wiped out. Even in the Jewish culture, they took that liberalized view of uncleanness, and thus, even within the Jewish home, which was always a very strong place, family, Jewish family, traditions were great. But even within the Jewish homes, there came a real breakdown, and there were a lot of divorces. Now, when you have divorces, as we, of course, today can see in our nation, you start having single moms, you start having latchkey kids, you start having all kinds of social problems, social disorder when the family unit is broken down. And God established the family unit. And God intended us to stick together. I sort of like what Ruth Graham said. A lot of times she got upset with Billy. But she said, never once did divorce ever enter her mind. She said that wasn't an option. She said, murder, yes, but never divorce. But I think that when you go into marriage, you should go into it with the thought of forever, as long as we are alive. I don't think you should ever go into it with, well, if it doesn't work out, we'll just get a divorce. I don't think that should ever be considered as an option. And I think that too many people today go into marriage with the idea of, well, if it doesn't work, we can, just go our separate ways. Not considering the consequences of that kind of activity. Greece was much worse. Basically, Demosthenes sort of expressed the Greek attitude. And that was that every man should have a courtesan for his companion. He should have a concubine for his sex, and he should have a wife to bear his legitimate children. And in the Greek home, the wife was restricted to the house. She was never allowed to go out alone in public, but she was to manage the house, but never thought of as someone to be loved and to be cherished. And the Romans, who in the beginning, in the first 400 years of Rome, there was only one recorded divorce. But when Rome conquered Greece physically, Greece conquered Rome morally. And the moral standards of Greece soon were adopted by the Romans. And the Romans, of course, became so completely immoral, and marriage meant nothing. And ultimately, Rome fell, as Gibbon points out in The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire, by the rotting planks of morality within. They weren't conquered by the outside, but just collapsed because the morals became so corrupt. God knows that for a strong society, there has to be strong families. There has to be a strong commitment. And you take your vows before the Lord. You make a covenant before God. And it should be kept sacred and holy. So Jesus said that this accommodation by Moses was because of the hardness of the hearts of the people. So in order to just avoid living kind of relationships, you should make the legal break. You should give her a writing of divorcement and send her away. But it isn't just trading spouses for a time. If she is sent away, then you can't take her back again. You can't say, oh, wow, this second one I've got is much worse than the first. Be better off to have her again, and you can't do that. It was forbidden. And so that was an accommodation, notice though, because of the hardness of their hearts. God made that allowance. God's best is something that people don't always rise to. And I believe that when a person doesn't rise to God's best, then there is a second best, a third best. And I think too often people are settling for something less than God's best. I desire the best that God has for me. I don't want to go to heaven on a third-class ticket. I want God's best. And I want to rise to God's highest level for me. And that should be the desire of each of our hearts. Not to compromise. Not to settle for something less than God's best, but always seeking God's best. But there are some people who harden their hearts to God's best. And that's always sad. When they want to settle for something less, It was God's desire for the nation of Israel that they have no earthly king, that they be a nation that was ruled by God. And that was God's best for that nation. But one day the people came to Samuel and they said, "We want a king to reign over us like the other nations." Samuel went before the Lord brokenhearted, and God said, "Don't be brokenhearted, Samuel. They haven't rejected you, they've rejected me from reigning over them. And so go ahead and anoint for them the king that I will show you." They didn't want to live up to God's best. They wanted to have second best, an earthly king that they could look up to. And surely their kings brought them into all kinds of problems and difficulties. But it is interesting to note that God did the best for them on that level that they selected. God will always raise you to the highest level that you will allow him. But unfortunately, many people do not allow God to raise them up higher. They want to stay at a level down here. And God will do the best for you on that level. But it is his desire to raise you to a higher level, always. The hardness of the people's heart kept them from God's best. And thus, to save just social calamities, God set up the law of divorce. Make it official, make it final, make the separation. There are many people that have hardened their hearts to their spouses. And they become cold. They become indifferent. They're no longer loving or caring. And their hearts have become hardened to the marriage relationship. That hardness of heart can be manifested in the way we treat each other, the way we talk to each other. It can be manifested in the abuse that we heap upon our spouse. Physical abuse sometimes, emotional abuse many times, verbal abuse many times. Now, that all comes out of a hardened heart. And because of the hardness of the heart, rather than two people just living together, tearing each other apart, tearing each other down. That kind of relationship that is just degrading to both. That's the hardness of heart that the Jews had, that God made accommodation for. And under the law said, let him give her a writing of divorcement. However, in the beginning, it was not so. And this uncleanness, again, Jesus limits that to moral impurity, fornication. And thus, under that, God condoned divorce. Under the law, if you were married and you went out and committed adultery, both you and the person with whom you committed adultery would be stoned to death. And thus your mate would be freed from the marriage bonds by the fact that you were dead. You were either a widow or a widower, but the offending party was put to death. And thus you would be free from the marriage vows that you had taken. And so that was the allowance that Jesus made. But notice, it wasn't a law, it wasn't required that you divorce. If it can be worked out, if you can work through it, it's not easy, but if you can do it, then that's still God's best plan. You may have failed morally, but in repenting, coming back. David, a man after God's own heart, committed adultery, but God forgave him. There is forgiveness. The woman that was taken in the very act of adultery, brought to Jesus by the Pharisees who wanted to stone her. Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn thee." But God did make that exception as far as divorce. There's another possible cause for divorce in the Scriptures. Paul speaks about it in his first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 7, beginning with verse 10. He said, "And unto the married I command, and yet not I, but the Lord. Let not a wife depart from her husband. And if she depart," you see, there's the second best. First best is, hey, don't depart. Second, if and she does depart, let her remain unmarried or be reconciled to her husband, and let not the husband put away his wife. Now, Paul said that was the command of the Lord. Now, I'm going to give you my opinion. To the rest I speak, not the Lord. If a brother has a wife that believes not, and she is pleased to dwell with him, let him not put her away. And the woman which has a husband that believes not, and if he's pleased to dwell with her, let her not leave him. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the believing wife is sanctified by the husband. Else were your children unclean, but now they are holy. But if the unbelieving depart, let him depart. A brother or a sister is not under bondage in such cases, but the Lord has called us to peace. So, because you've accepted the Lord, your partner is not content to stay with you, you're going to be a Christian, not going to stay around. Paul said, let him depart. You're not under bondage. Your relationship to Christ, of course, is superior above all other relationships. So the declaration you are not under bondage is up for interpretation. And there are those who do interpret that as you're not under bondage to remain single or under bondage to the vows that you had taken because they have departed because of your faith in Christ. And there are those that see that as a legitimate reason for remarriage if God should bring someone along into your life. Today, there are many people who are in their second marriages, third marriages. Does that mean that you're living in adultery? No. Does that mean that God won't bless you? No. We recognize that there is hardness of heart today. And if God, under the law, made special provisions because of the hardness of a person's heart, surely under this age of grace, there are allowances by God for issues that have arisen because of the hardness of a person's heart. And their spouses have perhaps departed. I do believe, however, that if you are in a marriage, you need to do everything possible to hold that marriage together. And sometimes the glue that really holds the marriage together is prayer. Praying for that one. Praying over the issues that trouble you, needle you, that get under your skin. Praying that God will help you. You see, the whole thing comes back to attitudes. The attitude of my heart. I can have the kind of attitude that says, you shouldn't treat me like this. You shouldn't say those things to me. And I can let things fester within, and I can develop a bitterness. And Peter warns about that root of bitterness, how that it can affect my prayer life and affect my walk with the Lord. We should seek God's highest and God's best for our lives. And I think that, whatsoever state you're in, when the Lord apprehends you, that you should continue in that state, if possible, within the marriage. And I believe that God can work out differences and disagreements and problems. And that many times God is greatly honored when we work through the issues, and honored when we stick it out and stick together. So it all comes back to what is the attitude of my heart. Do I want to please God? Do I want God's best for my life? Am I willing to stay in a situation that may not be ideal or perfect in order that God's best might be worked out in me? Am I willing to let God change me? Change my attitudes? Change my responses and my reactions? Am I willing to let God really work in my life and really take the lower seat, so to speak? So many problems arise from our demanding our rights. And that kind of attitude can get you into all kinds of problems. You remember, well, no, you don't. Most of you don't. But when I was a little kid, they used to have these Burma shave signs along the highway. And they were planted about a quarter mile away, and you read 5 or 6 and it makes up the full sentence, or the full thought. And I can remember one that used to be out on the way to Ventura from Los Angeles, out about the area of Thousand Oaks. And it says, famous last words of light that shine. Of course, in those days it was all 2-lane highways. Famous last words of lights that shine. If he won't dim his, I won't dim mine. My rights. You've offended me. I'm hurt. Oh, who are you? You see, that's the whole problem. It's my attitude of myself. And that's what Jesus is coming at. The attitude of my heart. That's the most important thing of all. And these are things that Jesus is now using to demonstrate the attitude of a person's heart. He's going to get very, very particular here in a little bit. He's going to talk about when someone slaps you on the cheek. What attitude do you have then? When someone borrows from you and doesn't give it back, what's your attitude then? And he's going to use these illustrations. They're not laws. They're illustrations to help us see our own hearts. You see, that's the biggest problem, is that we don't know ourselves. We're living in I have my ideal self, my super ego. And this is what I really am. If things were all, everybody was doing the right thing and all, I would really be a wonderful person. But it's all their fault, because they've pulled, the strings and they've upset me. But had they done, I would have, this really isn't the way I really want to respond. But and this super ego of what we see ourselves, so wonderful and nice. Jesus is going to show you that you're not so nice. That all of us have attitudes that force us to come to Him for forgiveness. There is none that are righteous, no, not one. Every one of us have sinned and come short of God's glory. Every one of us have attitudes that are wrong. Attitudes that show that we haven't yet really been crucified with Christ. The old nature, the old man is still there in all of its ugliness, just waiting for someone to trigger the wrong responses. And so Jesus is going to bring us to the cross. He's going to bring us to the end of ourself and the hopelessness of reformation or struggle on our own part. He's going to bring us to the cross where I say, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I need help. And He's waiting for you to come to that place. And the moment you do, there's help available. As long as you're blaming the other person, or as long as you're saying, well, I know I can do it, I just have to try a little harder, you're not going to make it. It's till you recognize my attitude stinks. God, I need forgiveness. I need help. When that time comes, then God can begin to work. But as long as you're lying about the thing, as long as you're being deceived yourself about it, God can't work with it. It's not until you recognize and confess and bring it to the Lord, and then is when God can begin to affect his work in your life by the Spirit as he molds and shapes you now into the image of Jesus Christ. And that's our desire. So Jesus is going to use these illustrations not to set new laws. When he said, if someone smites you on the right cheek, give him the other, that's not a law. That's not a rule. That won't make you righteous. It only will reveal to you how much you still esteem yourself. In that you've offended me, or you have, insulted me, or and this kind of bit, and until the Lord brings us to who am I, then God can deal with it, and God will. Father, we thank you for your desires to lift us to the highest levels, to the highest peaks. And Lord, help us that our desires might be in harmony with yours. That we would desire, Lord, above everything else, to come into a higher relationship, living above the world, the things of the world, living, Lord, in fellowship with you, full, complete, rich. Lord, with John, we recognize that you must increase and we must decrease. And so, Lord, help us, because we can't do it ourselves. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Shall we stand? The pastors are down here at the front to pray for you. If maybe tonight the Spirit of God was sort of putting the finger on an issue in your heart or in your life, attitudes that the Lord wants to deal with, issues that the Lord wants to help you in, and you realize, I need help. This is wrong. I can't control it. I need God's help. You're at a place where God can help you. I would encourage you to come on forward. They're here to pray for you, that you might experience God's victory over the flesh, the old life, the old nature. Maybe God wants to lift you to a higher rung tonight. He wants to do a work in your life. They're here to pray with you and to help you in those areas. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever.
This is the end of this message. If you would like further information on any of our products or to receive our free catalog, contact The Word for Today. The address is P.O. Box 8000, Costa Mesa, California, 92628. Or you may reach us by our toll-free number, 1-800-272-WORD. That's 1-800-272-WORD.